Alrighty. As usual, just gotta make sure everything's going through the tubes. I think we're in good shape. Cool. Welcome to stream number 13. I'm gonna get straight into it because I'm super just excited about the voting options that my subscribers got to vote on for what I'm gonna be working on this go around. So let's hop over here. Poll results. We got 2 votes. For the focus state component, the other option was to work on budget table rows, which I think for the past like 2 or 3 streams kind of been building the subcomponents that support those. But yeah, we're doing focus states, which is so exciting because there's this new method out there, you know, for handling these. So just to demo real quick, like what does a focus state look like in YNAB? So I just hit tab on my keyboard. The first element that gets selected is this chevron, and it looks like it has rounded corners, and that's giving that roundness to the focus state. It looks like there's like 2 or 3 pixels of this teal, and then beyond that, there's like 1 or 2 pixels of white. So that is the focus state that we are going to be building. So if we jump back in here, now this is not going to be my first time doing focus states in this series of streams. Let's see, yeah, if we zoom into these guys, and actually, I might have the wrong blue. I wonder if there was actually an update to YNAB. You can see I've got this, it's not so much a teal, it's just more of, there's a lot less green in this blue here. But yeah, I've already added some focus states to things, but this is using what I would call a legacy method now, where we're kind of faking it with drop shadows. Now, the nature of YNAB's focus state, actually, this is fine because it doesn't have any distance between the outer edges of the actual object and then those rings, those colorful rings. But a lot of focus states do, or folks, you know, want to have that option for their system. So yeah, I want to demo first sort of this old method just to have this all in one complete stream so that way folks have a reference. So I'm going to just kind of come over to an empty corner of the canvas here. So as always, as ever, buttons are a great example. Let's throw some auto layout on this and get some reasonable numbers here. We'll do 24 for top and bottom, 0 space between. Okay, not the cutest label you've ever seen. 4 pixels rounded corners, but we've got something to work with here, right? Let's see. Sorry, just wanted to zoom in enough so you could see what's going on, but not so much that we got the pixel grid. I guess I could turn that off. Oh, and apologies, folks. Let's see. I want to enable Keycaster. Or nope, it was Keystroke Pro, not Keycaster. So that way you can see all these shortcuts I'm doing. So to pull up that quick menu, Command / really handy. And I'm looking for pixel grid. Oh no, that's not what I want. That shows me, yeah, if I've got any kind of fuzzy stuff going on. All right, we'll worry about it later. We've got our button. So if I'm building that focus state, the old way to do it would have been, let's get out of the scale tool there. We'll go to effects and we'll put a drop shadow on. Now, what we want to do here is, of course, get rid of the blur, 0. And then, yeah, basically get rid of all those defaults. So 0 out everything up here. And we want 100% opacity because we want to be dealing with a, you know, flat color to get those rings. We can't see what we're doing right now, but let's first, the first drop shadow that we'd want to create to get this kind of an effect would be the white one, because we have 2 different colors here, so we're going to need 2 different shadows. So we would do white, and yeah, I'm going to just make a call here and say that we've got like 1 pixel on the white and then like 2 pixels on the blue, so 3 total. So for our spread, we need a spread of 3. Now this isn't great because our fill is also white, so I'm just going to pick kind of a random pink color here. Great, we've got that set up. Now here's something that people frequently run into. The spread in this dialog might be disabled. There's two reasons that could happen. If you do not have a fill on your frame that you're adding this shadow to, this will become disabled. If you hover over this, Figma gives us a little message, only supported frames or components with visible fill paints. So we have to have a fill, that's one requirement. The other requirement, I think this is still the case, this is my understanding, so put that fill back on, is that clip contents also needs to be turned on. If it's turned off, you can see here we have the shadow applied, but we can't see it. As soon as I turn clip contents on, it returns. So those are two requirements, which is another kind of tough constraint. Some folks, you know, there very well might be circumstances where you don't want to have a fill on your button. Perhaps it's like a ghost button, right? Where it's just going to adopt whatever surface color it's sitting on. So yeah, it's not horrible, but it's not great. But we've got those two constraints met. It has a fill, it has clip contents. We can use spread now, and now we can add our second drop shadow. We'll do the same thing. We'll get rid of the blur and that 4 pixels on the y-axis. This time it's going to be setting a spread to 2. And we can pick a blue color. And we've got our effect. So this is how you used to, this is how you would handle your focus states. And this is great because it doesn't add any extra layers. These drop shadows aren't going to get in the way of the bounding box, right? I'm still, like, if we look at the edges of the box here, if I flip between outline mode and not, yeah, you know, we're adhering to the physical bounds of that object. So it's like pretty good. But what about when you want to create some distance from, like, have that ring kind of be sitting, like have a little 1 pixel, 2 pixel gap, right? What would that look like? This is where it's kind of crummy. In this example, the top drop shadow would have to kind of take a sample of the surface color that the button is sitting on. So in this case, I'm just on Figma's canvas, and that's, you know, looks like this ES-E5, or yep, ES-E5-E5, right? So now I can kind of get that effect. I would probably choose a different ring color here, right? And this is cool, you know, it's fine until I have situations like this where maybe the button, you know, if it's sitting on a gradient, you're kind of out of luck. Or if it's straddling 2 different surface colors, I don't see that too often, but it could happen. You know, it doesn't work. We're faking that transparency here. So it's tough. It's not a great method. The other thing here is that you can see I'm just working with regular drop shadows here. But on my other example with these buttons, I've got a saved style, focus state visible. And that's great because it means that if I wanted to update, let's go and edit this. If I wanted to change this blue, because now I know it's a teal, right? In fact, let's do it. This is great because I can just come into this style, update this swatch to teal, and I only had to do this in one space, but now all of my shadows across the whole file are going to update. That's kind of cool because we get that like componentization of this style, but you know, we still have that same problem, not in YNAB necessarily, but it doesn't solve things. It further exacerbates this issue of like that background color gap, right? Because we've got one style. So then the solution might be you have multiple focus state styles with like your common surface colors. So like focus visible on white, focus visible on gray, you know, all of the surfaces that your objects could be sitting on. And that's a lot to keep track of. It's not awesome. So these are the old methods. Let's build it the new way, the much more efficient way, the way that I am so excited about. I've mentioned this a couple times now, but I first heard about this method from Molly Helmuth, following her on Twitter. Blew my mind about how like elegantly simple this approach was. And I was like, I think I tweeted about this. I was like, I am so mad that I didn't think of this. It was just like, oh, of course you would do it this way. It's great. So I've removed my shadows. We've got our button, right? Let's build the focus state. It's actually going to happen separately as a separate object. So I'm going to draw a frame. We'll call it focus rings. Now, I'm going to, again, show the method, show them a little bit of a more complex situation here where the rings are offset, where there's a transparent gap between the rings and the outer bounds of that object, just for the sake of demo. So we've got our focus rings. What we don't want is a fill, but we do want a stroke. And I'm not even going to mess with rounding corners. All that we care about with this is getting that ring color correct, right? And then we have to also decide, well, how thick should it be? And in fact, we should, oh, here's another thing, folks. I didn't mention this in the earlier demos. Drop shadows cannot yet leverage color styles. If we come back here to this style, and we go to edit it, these are just flat color values in hexadecimal. So if this teal ever changes, that stuff doesn't happen very often, but you know, it's doesn't feel great to not be connected to the color styles that you put a lot of time and effort setting up. So that's another downfall to this method, is you're kind of like, you're one layer removed from some of your system that you've set up. But with this method, because it's a stroke, we're using a stroke and not a shadow, we can grab our color styles, which is awesome. And let's, you know, even more complex. So with this, you know, well, actually, no, never mind. I'm thinking of an already more complex scenario, but let's do this one first. So we've got our focus ring. I'll make it singular. Now, what Molly originally demoed a few months ago, this is like back in February, was just kind of having a regular frame here. You don't even need auto layout. And then you drop this into the object that's going to be, it needs a focus ring, right? And this looks silly because, you know, you're like, oh, well, we're using, your button is using auto layout. So like, how does this work? The whole trick is absolute positioning. That's what allows us to do this. So when we absolute position that object, now we have the freedom to place it anywhere we want and use constraints to make sure it's like aware of its parents' dimensions, and then stretch or squash to, you know, whatever we tell it to. So here, now that I've set absolute positioning on it, I can just kind of match up to the button. I've kind of got like a 1 pixel gap. Let's do 2 pixels. Oh, another way I could do that, you can see me like, you know, just nudging or like stretching by 1 pixel here. I could also just set the stroke to be outside. And in this case, you know, maybe I want those rounded corners here. I can set those up. 6 looks good. And, you know, good to go. Now, if this is ever, I'm going to put a background rectangle here. If we've ever got this situation where, okay, the button is sitting on, you know, some different color, it works, right? It totally works because we have a true transparent background. And in a circumstance where, you know, auto layout is still going to work just great. I'm remembering though, I didn't set up my constraints. This is an important part. You want this to be kind of pinned to the top and bottom, left and right. So that way when you do use auto layout to, apologies, I'm having trouble selecting the label. This seems to be another thing, is to get that focus ring on top. It's odd. It seems like it's kind of like the old auto layout dilemma where the layers panel was flipped. So it looks like putting your focus ring on top makes it easier to select your label. Of course, you might be using component properties, so you're punching in that value in the design panel directly, but you can see it's going to grow and shrink along with the button, which is exactly what we want. What else is cool about this is when you don't need it, you can just hide the layer. And I think my understanding is this is a little bit more realistic with how like focus states work. For example, in these old buttons that I have, I've got a default state. I've got a default state with focus. Yeah, you can see I broke it out as a separate property. A lot of folks, I think, tend to put focus state as a state, you know, just right alongside their hover state or their pressing states. But the thing is you can have a focused, like an object that's set to focus, but you can also hover on that at the same time. Maybe you don't want to have like a unique effect for that, but yeah, focus is something that can, kind of like disabled states, I think, is sort of separate from those mouse interactions, right? You can use your keyboard to evoke focus. You can, there's other things that will focus objects. So this is great because we can use component properties to break this out. And that's like the level 2 of this that I wanted to talk about. There is no reason why you shouldn't grab this focus ring. So I'm just going to select that layer and then come out here and, well, I'll just drag one out. Grab the focus ring. I'm going to get rid of some of those customizations, right? And I don't even care about the dimensions here, but I'm going to turn this into a component. You know, why not? Why not turn it into a component? It's no extra layers, right? And we have a little bit more control. Like if I'm using this in a bunch of different places, I want to be able to change the width, change whether it's outside or inside or on the center. Excuse me. So that's the next move here, is like, let's actually get this focus state in here as a component. And we can do the same thing. We can take this instance, set it to absolute position, set it where we want. We can override things like border radius, so we can still get that customization, because some objects are going to have like rounded corners and different roundness values. So being able to override that is great and make it custom to that component. Can't forget, we want to move that on top to make the label text layer accessible. And we also want to adjust our constraints, and we get the same effect. And again, because it's a component, so you can see I have the component selected here, I can change that stroke. I can set it to outside. Maybe I want 2 different rings, right? Maybe I still want that double color effect. So like now if I was actually building this for YNAB, this is how this would work on some of these objects. I would actually have it hugging up against the sides, and I would still do this method. Like the shadows work fine, but I want to be connected to my color styles, right? Like that's another gain. And let's see what kind of, I guess 4 is what we picked. Now, how would I get a second ring in here, right? Like I have my teal, but I also need that white around it. And when you're using styles, you can't stack different, or I'm sorry, when you're using strokes with color styles, you can't stack them. Like I can't say, oh, give me a separate stroke that's 3 pixels and using some other color style. Figma doesn't let us do that yet, but there's no reason, because we are working with layers now instead of drop shadows. We can just put another thing in here. So I'll do the same thing. I've got frame 16. We'll call this like inner ring. Use white. And even here, I'm going to absolute position this guy. Actually, I wonder if it doesn't need to be. I don't think, oh, and I don't have access to that because I'm not using auto layout here. So if I grab this inner ring, or I guess I want this to be an outer ring. So hold on, let's do outside, and I'm going to change this to a different color that's a little bit, let's do this green, or even a gray, something more visible. Yeah, outside. And I'm going to position it. Is there a smarter, even smarter way to be doing this? Perhaps. Well, you know, we'll learn by doing. So actually, this is the outer ring. And maybe this should be flipped, you know. But good enough for now. And what we want to do, you can see it's looking really weird over here on the button, and that's because I want to set up my constraints here. And just like we did before, the focus ring now has this child element, so we're going to need to also customize the drop shadow here. And we've got it. And so that's how that would get handled. We're using color styles. In this case, it costs us 2 extra layers. And if we componentize this, our focus ring, could use a component boolean property, and that can just be a true false statement as its own prop, separate from things like state of ability, like is it disabled, is it enabled. So I am so excited about this whole method. And yeah, let's like actually, you know, delete that button, but let's put this to work. Let's see what it looks like to replace existing drop shadow rings. I've been mentioning these guys. We can start here. So got our focus ring. Now, what I'm wondering here is like this outer ring, focus ring thing. What's the way to do it? I might, let's see. I'm gonna leave it for now. I think it'll become clear if it becomes problematic, this construction. What I'm kind of, I guess, like wrestling with is we have like a nested inner layer, but we're calling it the outer ring. It feels like a little bit of a mismatch, but it's fine. So what I'm going to do for these, first we need to look at kind of how these are built. So like I said before, we've got a state and we've got focus. I think the same thing is going on over here. So we've got, and what different states do we have? I think just hover and default. So that's fine. And I think what we can get rid of, we can actually remove some variance here, right? We don't need dedicated variance for focus state because like I said, we can use component properties. We're doing the exact same thing. We're going to get this exact same kind of construction in the design panel, except this will be a component property instead of a variant property. So we are going to be saving some layers here. I can fully get rid of those. I will nest this inside, absolute position. Just like before, we're going to stretch it out. And apologies, this particular button has a gray stroke that is very close to Figma's default canvas color, so it's probably quite hard to see. We'll get our rounding going on. And you know, this could be something that you bake in to your focus state, just so you don't have to do this every time. But my plan with this is to get one of these set up, and then I'm actually going to copy and paste this instance of the focus ring, so that way I don't have to do that corner rounding every single time. I can just copy paste this into the next variance. So, you know, let me explain a little bit what's going on here, what I'm thinking. We've got a default state and a hover state. Like I said before, those are both like mouse interactions. Or I mean, the default is just like it's at rest, it's static, nothing's happening to it. But when someone does mouse it over it, we get this blue color. You can have a focus ring on a at rest element. You can also have a focus ring on a hovered element. Look at this. Like I've got my keyboard focus. I'm also hovering over it. So that's what we're kind of setting up here. It's a little bit more realistic. So what I'll do is use the layer boolean property. We'll just call this focus. And I think a good default is to actually have that turned off, but we'll do that after we're done applying this everywhere. So I'll do the same thing. I want a focus ring inside of here. We'll center it up. That is it. Yep, and it came along with its component property. And that is it. Let's see. So here's our new one with the little eyeball. That's our component property. Conflicting property name. Yeah, so when we get rid of this variant property, we're good to go. And we can, let's see, how might we change the default? I think, yeah, when we set this to false, or we could have just hidden the layer, that'll be off by default. Close those up, and we get the exact same experience as before. Focus, on, off, right? I guess another, you know, in terms of organizing, keeping your properties organized, this does introduce another constraint because we can't mix the order of, like, we can't mix variants and component properties together yet in the design panel. They're kind of like in their separate sections. All of your variants come first at the top, and then if you have any component properties, those fall below. So that's something else to think about when you're using this method, is if you have a component with a ton of properties, like, it's going to create some distance between state and focus. I'm not too worried about it. In my experience, like at work, I do not see designers using focus state in their prototypes very much, mostly because if we are ever in a position where we're testing keyboard navigation, I mean, like, I think up until recently, you couldn't tab through a Figma prototype, and you know, that's something, I think that's behavior that we can test a lot better in more of like a code prototype environment, like something like on a staging site. So there's certain things, it's like, just because you can kind of cobble together a prototype in Figma and test it doesn't mean like Figma is the most appropriate testing tool for that. So let's do the same thing here. I've already got copied to my clipboard that instance with those rounded corners. Oh, hold up. I'm noticing something. I'm going back to the original here. So first of all, let's get the layer architecture matching. We want the focus ring on top of the label. And, oh, I did not set up my constraints. So I'm holding down Command to, select these guys, which I don't think I actually needed to do. So anyway, we'll do the same here. We'll grab the focus ring, stretch it. Oh, wait, no. Holding down Command does do something. If I just select these without holding anything, it's pinning to that specific side. But this lets me select the opposite side without losing the selection on the other end. So we'll grab that, paste here. I paste it outside for some reason, so we'll just drag that into the hover state. We'll use our alignment tools to line that guy up. Make sure that this focus ring is at the very top of the layers panel. Get our constraints fixed up. Hide that, and it's already hooked up to a focus property. Ooh, but property not found on component, add property. Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting that that didn't come through. So let's make sure that this is hooked up on both. We'll test it out, not the label. Test this guy out. And yeah, we've still got our old variant property here, so we'll get rid of that. Let's actually, yeah, so that's working great. We've got it. So that's the process of taking your new focus ring and updating your old variant. And that was a perfect half-hour demo. So I am so thrilled to have gotten that done. Really looking forward to future streams where, can do some tidying up. That might be an option coming up soon. If I flip back over here, you can see that, you know, it's just been, we're all over the place in this file. And I do take file hygiene pretty seriously at work. I should do the same in my personal projects here. But it's up to you guys. I'll offer a couple options for every single stream, and I really just mean 2. You're not going to have to go through this whole list of things. But I want to build stuff that, you know, y'all are interested in. So you have a little bit of power here to kind of direct what I'm working on. So I'll think of some things for next stream. If you subscribe to my newsletter within about a week, so today's April 20th, if you subscribe before the 27th, you'll get that opportunity to vote. Next stream will be 2 weeks from now, so we'll be, I think, not quite into May. No, yeah, maybe into May at that point. Cool. Thank you for watching. Hope this was useful. Yeah, I'll see you in a few.